Welcome to the Cenario Podcast, your guide to mental health and well-being. Each episode, we uncover practical tools, discuss expert insights, and explore how supplements can transform your mental health journey. Get ready to learn, grow, and thrive with us.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something I think, a lot of us grapple with those really insistent, repetitive urges. You know, the ones that just grab you and demand you do something even when your rational mind is screaming, this is pointless.
Absolutely.
We've got a great set of sources here looking into exactly that, what the material calls compulsive meaning.
It's a really evocative term.
It is, isn't it? So think about this for a second, you listening. Maybe it's not the classic checking the stove example.
Right. People think of the obvious ones.
But what about hitting refresh on your email? Like for the 10th time in maybe 3 minutes.
Or endlessly scrolling through news feeds late at night.
Yeah. Knowing it just makes you feel anxious, or frankly worse. These aren't just habits, are they? They feel sort of required.
The core of it, required.
So our mission today is to really dig into what's driving that feeling, that demand for, I guess, certainty or order, and importantly, how we can maybe break free from that cycle.
And that term, compulsive meaning, it really gets at something deep, doesn't it? It frames the behavior not just as like a tic, but as this underlying attempt to force some structure.
Impose order on chaos.
Exactly. Where the mind just perceives chaos or uncertainty. So the definition we're working with is this powerful, often non-negotiable urge to do certain things over and over.
Even when you know better.
Precisely. Often against your own rational will. You might know it's pointless, maybe even harmful, but the inner distress, that anxiety, it's just so intense.
So you have to do the thing.
You have to do the thing to get just a moment of peace, even temporary peace.
Okay, that distinction feels really important because, we all have habits, routines.
Sure, brushing your teeth.
Right, tying my shoes the same way every morning. How do we draw the line? How do we confidently say, okay, this is a benign habit, and that's a compulsion?
I think it really boils down to the function of the behavior.
Yeah.
What is it doing for you? A habit, like you said, brushing teeth, it's efficient. It saves brain power, right? You don't consciously think through every step of making coffee.
It's true. It's automatic.
Exactly. A compulsion, on the other hand, it actually costs you mental energy. It's performed specifically, deliberately, to get temporary relief from a really strong internal feeling.
Like anxiety.
Anxiety, fear, maybe just overwhelming stress. That moment you feel driven, compelled to act, just to escape a negative feeling. That's compulsion territory.
So the action is like medicine for the feeling.
Yes. But it's like medicine with really bad side effects, The time it wastes, the guilt afterwards. It often makes the underlying issue worse in the long run.
Oh, okay, right. Let's really unpack that mechanism then. How does our brain, which we think of as this like super efficient optimization machine,
Supposedly, yeah.
how does it get trapped in this loop where a quick fix actually leads to more distress later? Why does it keep picking the short-term relief over, long-term well-being?
It's a fascinating and honestly quite a powerful neurological trap. It's all about negative reinforcement.
Okay.
Psychologists see this compulsive behavior as fundamentally an uncontrollable urge to act. And it gets deeply reinforced because it provides that temporary escape.
So the escape itself makes you want to do it again next time.
Precisely. And this pattern, it applies across the board. We see it in diagnosed clinical conditions, sure, but also in just everyday stress coping mechanisms that maybe go a bit too far.
And our sources actually lay out a pretty clear 5-step pattern. It shows exactly how this behavior gets locked in and reinforced. It's kind of illuminating about how the anxious brain works.
It really is.
So it starts with step 1, the trigger or obsession. This is the stressful thought, right? Or maybe a situation.
Yeah, the what if thought. What if I didn't lock the door? What if I offended someone?
Yeah.
Or just a generally chaotic situation that feels overwhelming.
Okay. And that trigger immediately leads to step 2, anxiety.
And we're not talking just mild worry here. This is often intense discomfort, a real restlessness, or even outright fear that the person feels they must neutralize. Like right now.
The brain's alarm bell is ringing.
Loudly. Screaming, fix this! Resolve the threat. Even if the threat is only perceived.
And that internal panic, that noise, it demands an immediate, concrete action. Which brings us to step 3, the compulsion.
The repetitive behavior itself. The ritual.
Could be checking the lock, like we said, or washing hands until they're raw. Or maybe constantly tweaking a sentence in an email.
Exactly. The specific action almost doesn't matter as much as its function. Its primary goal is simply to quiet that alarm bell, to address the anxiety.
And here's the crucial part, the bit that makes the cycle stick.
What?
Step 4, relief.
Yes. The moment the compulsion is done, the brain gets this short, sharp hit of relief. The anxiety drops. The alarm bell shuts off.
Okay. But only for a bit.
Only for a moment. But here's the kicker. That immediate, powerful feeling of calm teaches the brain something really important. It teaches the brain that the compulsive action worked, that it was necessary and effective at stopping the bad feeling.
I see. That's where it gets really insidious. And this connects back to that idea of compulsive meaning, right?
Absolutely.
The relief reinforces the behavior, locking in the cycle, which slams us right back into step 5, repetition. The compulsion gives the brain this, temporary illusion, a feeling that the world is ordered, meaningful, certain, controllable.
It is an illusion of control. But because it works so quickly, so immediately, the brain just defaults to it every single time that anxiety pops up again.
Wow. Okay, so understanding that 5-step loop, trigger, anxiety, compulsion, relief, repetition, that's really key.
It's the essential shortcut, to spotting compulsions, especially because, as you hinted earlier, they show up in ways that go way beyond those sort of classic visible examples people usually think of.
Right. When we think compulsion, we often picture those very physical, fear-based actions.
Exactly. Let's call them traditional examples. They're often deeply rooted in fear or this intense need for physical order and safety.
Like compulsive cleaning.
Compulsive cleaning or washing, yeah. Often driven by a profound fear of germs, contamination, maybe even a feeling of internal badness that needs washing away.
Or the checking.
Or compulsive checking. Constantly confirming doors are locked, the stove is off, alarms are set, maybe rereading emails or documents over and over.
What's the fear there?
It's usually a fear of catastrophe. If I miss something, something terrible will happen. So the person is trying to get external proof, verification that the world is safe right now.
But we really need to broaden that picture, don't we? Because the sources make it clear that many compulsions today are more about emotional soothing, avoiding discomfort.
That's a huge area. These modern forms are often less obvious as compulsions. People might just see them as bad habits or lack of willpower.
But they can be just as damaging, right?
Absolutely. Just as damaging to your long-term stability and well-being. Think about behaviors driven by trying to soothe uncomfortable feelings.
Like eating.
Compulsive eating is a big one. Binging, not because you're hungry, but as a way to numb out, to suppress difficult emotions like sadness, anger, or boredom.
And you get that temporary comfort from the taste or fullness.
That immediate, fleeting relief, which is almost always followed by guilt, shame, physical discomfort, the cycle again.
Or compulsive shopping, that quick hit you get from buying something.
Definitely. Buying stuff impulsively to relieve stress, maybe after a bad day at work or an argument, you get that little dopamine spike.
It fades fast.
Fades very fast, often leaving you with buyer's remorse, debt, more stress.
And then there are the ones that just consume time and energy.
Oh yeah, the time sinks. Compulsive gaming or gambling. The drive there is the constant engagement, the urge to keep playing or betting, despite clear negative consequences.
Like financial ruin or broken relationships.
And often, the underlying goal is just avoidance. Avoiding the real world, real problems, real feelings.
And probably the most common one we see all around us now, compulsive social media use.
It's everywhere, isn't it?
It really is. And it's often not about connecting or learning. It's that constant itch to refresh the feed, check notifications. Why?
Often simply to avoid boredom. Or the low-level anxiety that comes with just being still, with having a quiet moment for introspection.
So you reach for the phone for that tiny hit.
That tiny hit of stimulus, validation, maybe a fleeting sense of certainty. Oh, look, a notification. Something happened.
These are all basically coping mechanisms then.
Yeah.
Just maladaptive ones.
Exactly. They provide temporary relief, but they chip away at our emotional health, our finances, our time, our focus in the long run.
So, okay, we see the pattern, we see the examples. What about the why? What causes someone to develop these? The sources suggest it's usually not just one thing.
No, rarely is it simple. What we're looking at is almost always a complex mix. A kind of interplay between our biology, our psychology, and importantly, our environment.
Let's start with the biology. You mentioned brain chemistry earlier. Our sources dig into that, especially serotonin.
Yeah, serotonin comes up consistently. It's a key neurotransmitter for regulating mood, impulse control, anxiety.
So lower levels might be a problem.
Lower levels seem to create a kind of neurological vulnerability. It's like the brain's natural braking system isn't working quite as well.
Okay.
And then the brain's reward system gets involved. Normally, it reinforces things good for survival, food, connection, safety.
But here it gets hijacked.
Sort of hijacked, yeah.
Eh.
In compulsions, the reward system starts strongly reinforcing the anxiety-reducing behavior itself, that temporary relief we talked about.
Even though it's not truly beneficial long term.
Right. It prioritizes the immediate comfort, the escape from anxiety, over more rational long-term goals. It's like a misfiring reward signal.
And what about genetics? Do these tendencies run in families?
The sources do point to a genetic component, yeah. Particularly for tendencies related to anxiety disorders or the OCD spectrum. It suggests some people might inherit a sort of predisposition.
Doesn't mean you'll definitely develop it, but the vulnerability might be there.
Exactly. It's not destiny, but it can be a factor.
Okay, so beyond the brain chemistry and genes, what about, like, life experiences, external factors?
Oh, they play a huge role. Stress and trauma are major triggers.
How so?
Well, when life feels completely out of control, chaotic, unpredictable.
Like after a major loss or during intense pressure?
Yes. The compulsion can emerge as this kind of desperate internal attempt to grab onto any sense of control, even if it's just rigidly controlling one small repetitive action.
That makes sense. That link between external chaos and this internal need for rigid order.
It's a key dynamic. If the world won't be predictable, at least I can make this action perfectly predictable over and over again.
The sources also mention personality traits. Are certain types of people more prone to this?
It seems so. Traits like perfectionism or being highly conscientious.
Why them?
Well, these individuals often have a strong innate need for order, certainty, and getting things just right. This can make them more susceptible to the false promise of control that a compulsion offers.
The compulsion feels like a way to achieve that perfect certainty, even if it's an illusion.
Exactly. And one more factor we shouldn't overlook is learned behavior.
You mean watching others?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially in childhood. Growing up in a very anxious household, maybe with caregivers who relied on rituals or compulsive behaviors to manage their own stress.
A child might pick that up.
They might observe it and essentially adopt it as a normal or functional way to cope with discomfort. The behavior gets learned, whether it's actually helpful or not.
Wow. So it's really a tangled web of brain chemistry, genetics, life stress, personality, and learned habits.
It really is. Which also explains why it can feel so difficult to break free from.
So if we see ourselves, or maybe people we care about, caught in these cycles, what's the real cost? We know the short-term relief is there, but what's the long-term price?
The cost is high, and it spreads across life. Emotionally, it's draining. There's often intense guilt, shame, frustration, a feeling of being powerless.
I can imagine. Feeling trapped by your own mind.
Absolutely. And it hits relationships hard, too. Loved ones often struggle to understand why the rigid rituals, why the constant checking or distraction. It leads to arguments, misunderstandings, distance.
Yeah, it must be hard to explain that inner need to someone who doesn't feel it.
Very hard. And then there's the practical impact on just living. Productivity tanks. You can't focus because the urge keeps intruding.
Your time gets eaten up.
Time gets eaten up by the rituals or the avoidance behaviors. Your energy is just constantly drained by managing the compulsion and the anxiety around it.
Okay, this sounds pretty overwhelming. But the sources also stress something important. There's good news here, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's crucial. While it feels overwhelming, compulsive behavior is highly treatable. Science has given us really effective tools.
People can regain control.
They really can. The most effective strategies are grounded in behavioral science. They focus on basically retraining the brain's response to anxiety triggers.
So what are we talking about specifically? What works?
The gold standard really is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Okay, I've heard of CBT. How does it help with compulsions?
CBT helps you first identify those triggering thoughts, the catastrophic what-ifs that kick off the anxiety.
Right, step one in the cycle.
Exactly. Then it teaches you skills to challenge and replace those thoughts with more realistic, healthier ones. And crucially, it helps you build coping skills to just tolerate the anxiety.
Tolerate it without doing the compulsion.
Tolerate it without automatically jumping to the compulsive act. Learning that the anxiety, while uncomfortable, won't actually harm you and will eventually pass.
Okay. And I think the sources mentioned a specific type of CBT.
Yes, a specialized and very powerful form called exposure and response prevention, or ERP.
ERP. That sounds intense.
It can be challenging, yes, but it's often considered the heavy hitter for OCD and related compulsive issues. The research shows it has really profound long-term success rates.
So how does ERP work? Exposure and response prevention.
It means gradually, systematically, facing the thing that triggers your anxiety, the exposure part.
Like touching a doorknob you think is contaminated, or leaving the house without checking the lock 5 times.
Exactly. Whatever the specific trigger is. And then this is the critical part. You do the response prevention.
Yeah.
You deliberately resist the urge to perform the compulsion.
You just sit with the anxiety.
You sit with the anxiety. You don't wash your hands. You don't go back to check the lock.
Why does that work? Wouldn't the anxiety just skyrocket?
It does peak initially. That's the hard part. But ERP works through a process called habituation.
Habituation.
Yeah. If you stay in the situation, facing the fear, without doing the compulsive safety behavior, your brain eventually learns something crucial.
What does it learn?
It learns that the catastrophe you feared didn't happen. The anxiety, even though it peaked, eventually starts to decrease on its own.
Ah, so the connection breaks down.
Exactly. That targeted resistance, done repeatedly and gradually, weakens the link between the trigger and the compulsive response. The brain literally rewires itself.
That actually makes the idea of facing the fear feel a bit less impossible. It's like building tolerance.
That's a great way to put it. Building tolerance for the anxiety and uncertainty.
Are there other supports? What about medication?
Yes, medication can play a really helpful role for many people. Doctors often prescribe SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
The antidepressants.
They're often used for depression, yes, but they're also very effective for anxiety and OCD. They don't cure compulsions directly.
But they help with that underlying serotonin issue we talked about.
Exactly. By helping to balance serotonin levels, they can effectively turn down the volume on the anxiety and the intensity of the intrusive urges.
Take the edge off.
Take the edge off. Reduce the mental static. This makes it significantly easier for someone to engage in and benefit from therapies like ERP. It makes that hard work more achievable.
Okay, so therapy, maybe medication, anything else. The sources mentioned complementary things too.
Definitely. These aren't replacements for therapy, but they provide crucial support. Things like mindfulness and relaxation practices.
Meditation, deep breathing.
Yeah. Techniques like that help manage the baseline anxiety levels. And mindfulness specifically increases your awareness of the urge as it arises.
So you might catch it earlier, before you act.
Potentially, yes. It gives you that crucial pause, that moment of choice. And we really can't discount the basics of a healthy lifestyle.
Diet, exercise, sleep.
The foundations. Consistent sleep, reasonably healthy diet, regular exercise, they all contribute hugely to overall mental resilience and better impulse control. They make you less vulnerable to the triggers in the first place. Support groups can also be incredibly valuable.
Connecting with others who get it.
Exactly. Reduces the shame and isolation.
So, pulling all this together, what we've unpacked today shows that compulsions, this compulsive meaning, it's not about being weak-willed or flawed.
Not at all.
It's a learned, highly reinforced coping mechanism, usually born from stress, anxiety, fear. This fundamental attempt to impose some kind of order or certainty onto a world that feels really uncertain or scary.
And that attempt, while understandable, usually doesn't just fade away on its own, especially if it's become entrenched.
Right. Which is why the sources are so clear about needing to intervene.
Yes. Early intervention is really key. If you recognize these patterns starting, whether in yourself or someone you care about.
Don't wait until it takes over your life.
Exactly. Taking steps early, managing stress proactively, setting up healthy grounding routines, and crucially, seeking professional help before it becomes unmanageable. That's the most effective path.
It takes strength to ask for help with this.
It's absolutely a sign of strength and resilience, not shame. Recognizing you need support and reaching out for it is the first, most powerful step towards regaining control.
So, if compulsive meaning is the brain desperately trying to build structure, demanding certainty through these repetitive rituals, maybe here's a final thought for you to chew on. What if the real path forward isn't just about resisting the urge? What if it's also about learning to sort of sit with, to tolerate the inevitable, sometimes messy, sometimes beautiful uncertainty of life itself?
Learning to be okay with not always having control.
Yeah. What if that's where the deeper freedom lies? Something to think about.
Thanks for tuning in to the Cenario podcast. Don't forget to visit Cenario.com for more expert tips, articles, and supplements designed to support your mental health. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe and share it with a friend. Until next time, take care of yourself.